Good morning everyone, Nigel Saunders here. Today I'm going to be working on my larch forest. It has grown and grown and now it needs pruning. Here's a look at the larch forest. You can see it's really grown in. I'm starting this work early in the morning because I think it's going to take me most of the day to get this forest looking good. Not only has the forest grown in, but so has the moss. So that's going to take some scissor pruning too. Here is a look at the growth on the larch. So the first flush of growth extended, and you can see the needles have turned a darker green. And then on top of that first flush of growth, it's extended again with a second flush, and those are the lighter green needles. I'm going to be pruning it back. You can already see some buds on the branches that have formed. I'll show you a close-up of those. In here, at the base of each needle, is a dormant bud. Some are more visible than others, so you can see there's buds out here. Nothing on these needles, there's buds back here. So ideally, I'd like to prune back to a bud that you can see already, but sometimes you can prune back to dormant buds that aren't visible, and it will still create branches from the base of each needle. For most of the work, I'll just be using a pair of bonsai scissors, and I'll also be thinning the needles by just plucking them out with my fingers. I'm going to start the work in the apex of the trees, and I'll work my way down. That way I can shorten the top of the tree as much as possible and keep and maintain that conical form to the trees. So I'll just be coming in with the scissors at each shoot, looking for dormant buds or needles and pruning back. On this shoot here, I'm going to prune right back to here, pruning that whole shoot off and leaving about this much of the new growth. Here's an example of pruning, so you can see the old branch, the woody part, the new growth. You can see some buds that have formed out here, so I'll prune to a downward facing bud and prune off the tip of the new shoot like that. When I'm pruning the shoots, I'm reaching in, trying not to cut through any needles, leaving all the needles intact so you don't get browning of the tips. And I'm just kind of rough pruning at first to kind of get the shape reestablished. So I'm just kind of giving it an overall prune now, and then, as I said, I can come back in and further shorten branches, remove branches. But the important thing right now is just to be able to see the shape of the trees and to see the branches. Even with this branch pruning, you can see the apex here is really full still. So I'll come in with my fingers and thin it out, pruning off all the downward facing needles to thin out the foliage. This will allow light to get down to the lower branches. The trees are the most vigorous up in the apex here, so you can do more severe pruning in the apex and more needle thinning in the apex. And as you go down the tree, there's less and less vigor, so you prune and pluck a little less. Larches are deciduous trees, so theoretically you can remove all the needles, and after a while new needles will grow in. It's not like a pine. If you removed all the needles, the tree would die. Now I noticed on some of the needles I have some fuzzy white little clumps that look like cotton, and I think that is either mealybugs or aphids, something. So I'll definitely spray all this tree down with soap and water once I've got all the branches exposed. After the work today, I won't be putting the forest back in full sun because as I prune away, I'm exposing a lot of branches that are used to being a bit shaded out. So I've got to give it a bit of a transition until those needles that were in the shade kind of get used to more light, and then I can put it back in full sun. I've got the forest on my spinning tree bonsai turntable. So I can rotate it around as I work on the trees at the front and the back and the sides. It makes pruning a lot easier if you have a turntable. As you can see, the forest is very, very vigorous, so I can be quite severe with the pruning today. The trees have lots of stored energy in them, so flushing out once again won't be a problem for these larch. If your trees aren't really vigorous, I wouldn't recommend pruning them until they gain vigor. And the vigor comes from getting a strong root system and good conditions for the trees to grow. So good watering, fertilizer, sunlight, the usual things that make trees grow. I'm going to work away pruning all the trees back. It'll take quite a while, so it might be, an hour, maybe 2 hours, maybe 3 hours later, maybe more. So we'll come back and see what the trees look like after their initial pruning. I thought I'd just show you, there's some areas on the trees that are so dense you can't even see the branches. So what I do is I just come in with my fingers and I pluck the needles out. All the lower needles, all the long ones, and you just pluck it out, and eventually it kind of exposes the branch structure. And then you can come in and prune it. So that's what I do for really congested areas. If you don't do this kind of work, you'll lose all your branches, your inner branches. They'll just get shaded out on the trees. So it's important to keep the larch forest quite, thinned out, especially in the interior of the forest where the branches get very little light. And I've lost branches in the past because I didn't thin it enough. I didn't do enough work to the trees over the course of the summer. You can see my pile of needles is growing here, getting thicker. Here's my pile of pruned branches and needles, and I'm only like maybe a third done the first tree. So it's going to be quite a pile of foliage when I finish the forest. I found working on forest taught me a lot of bonsai techniques because I have to keep the trees small and compact. I can't just let them keep growing, or otherwise they interfere with each other. And it taught me a lot about sunlight, getting sun on each branch. If you don't get sunlight on the branches, they die off. Thinning the trees to get that sunlight in. So a forest requires a lot of bonsai techniques to keep your forest looking good and healthy. I'm going to take a branch off the apex, and it's this one here. If you see it there, it's right over top of the branch below. It'll shade that branch out, and it's getting too far to the right hand side. My apex, I had to prune it off, start a new leader, and it's very tilted to the right hand side. So I've got a lot of growth kind of going back to balance the apex out again. So I don't need this branch here, so I'm taking it right off. So here I go. Big cut coming up, just like that. Julian is eager to get the Porsche out, so he's been clearing the garage out here. And you can see the Porsche for the very first time without all kinds of junk in the way. So here it is. 1970 Targa 911, and it's an S. So the car has been modified to look like a later model. So it's got the newer bumpers, the whale tail, and it's on a trailer. So the trailer's kind of sunk into the ground. So Julian's been digging out the tires, kind of making a ramp at the front here. The back of the trailer is sitting on the ground back here. So it's going to be a difficult move. So the next step is Julian is going to take down the garage here, which you can see it's all ripped, the top. So we're going to take that down and then move the garage and then dig out the other side of the car or the trailer, the tires, and get the truck, hook it up, and tow it out of here. And it's going to go in the driveway so it can be worked on. Julian is cutting away the old wrecked canvas top. The Porsche is seeing sunlight for the first time in a long time. It's looking good, Julian.
Thank you.
Here is an update on the Porsche. The garage is going down. The canvas is off. Looking good. Julian's doing a good job. I have been working away at the trees. I think I underestimated how long this is going to take because I've been at this for a couple of hours now and I've only done a partial tree at the back and partial tree at the front. So it's taking a long time, but I've got all afternoon, and if it has to go into day 2, that's fine too. So here's my pile of branches and needles here, one of them, and over here I have another pile which is getting very thick. So one thing I have to watch is that the trees rely on their foliage to cool them down on hot days. The temperature in the greenhouse right now is 33 degrees Celsius. So it's not that hot in here yet, but if it gets warmer, I'll have to make sure I keep them misted and well watered. I have the solar powered fan blasting out air, and I have a fan in the doorway here bringing cool air in from outside, and all the vents are open in the greenhouse. So it's quite good air circulation in here. It's only if it gets up to, you know, in the over 40 that I would start worrying about too much heat on the trees. But I don't think it'll get that high. Julian has finished taking down the temporary garage. So the Porsche is out in the sunlight for the first time in like 25 years. So this side looking pretty good. There's a bit of rust on the other side. I'll show you that. Here's the other side, and the rust is in the door here. So there's some holes in that part of the door and ones up front. The rest of it seems pretty good. Julian said there might be some holes in the floor. There was a critter that got in here, and inside there's some chew holes in the seat. So maybe something was living in the seats, I don't know, mice or something. Yeah, but other than that, it's in pretty good shape. I don't know what it'll take to get it running. Hopefully not like a complete engine rebuild, but you never know. Something we'll have to find out. We're going to put a seafoam or something like that down the cylinders. Let it soak for a while. Try and turn it over by hand and see if the engine's seized or not. That'll be our first step towards getting it running again. The interior is pretty bad. It's just, there's this driver's seat. It's just been sitting so long. Door needs adjusting. But yeah, I mean, this is a 1970. It's in pretty good shape for a 1970. Over in the greenhouse, I've been working on the larch forest. I'll show you where I'm at. Here it is. So you can start to see a lot of the branches and the layers in the branches. It's definitely allowed a lot more light to get down to the moss now. But you can see I still have a lot of work to go. I find the pruning doesn't take that long. It's all the needle plucking, thinning it out, moving all the downward facing needles, just kind of thinning it out so you can see the branch structure. Takes a while. I think that apex is looking better. This is the direct front view now. I mean, it's still not real great, but it's okay. Yeah, so that's the larch forest. There's my robin on the fence that torments me whenever I come over here. It flies down and attacks me. Hello. I'm not Not sure why he's not attacking me, but oh well, I'm going to move out of here. It's a little warm in the greenhouse right now, so I'm going to come back to the larch forest a little later on when it's cooled down a bit. Meanwhile, I'll give all my plants a watering. Here is the 9/11 at the end of the day. Julian and Emma cleaned it all up, gave it a good wash, so it's looking quite nice. Nice to see it cleaned up once again. So this has a 2.7 liter flat 6 air-cooled engine in it. Let me lift the engine compartment up. There it is. So 3 spark plugs down there, 3 over this side. So we'll have to pull those, squirt some of that seafoam in there, let it sit for a while, and we'll try turning it over by hand and go from there. Needs new tires. It'll need new brakes, some body work. There'll be a lot. So we're going to have to get probably a welder, do all this body work ourselves. It's too expensive to get it fixed somewhere else. So tomorrow we're going to try and get the truck started and position it to try and hook it up to the trailer here. So yeah, the interior is pretty rough. However, it's here. It's a 9/11, 1970, ready to get running again. Here's the boot, the bonnet. So in here you have your spare tire, the battery down here. Originally it used to have 2 6-volt batteries, one in this side and one in this side. So now it's just replaced with a 12-volt. So there's lots of room for luggage and stuff in the front here. And the metal work, like all the inner fenders, they look good. I don't see any rust on those at all. But I'm sure, you know, the floors might be rusted out. So lots of work to go on it. But Julian did a good start today. Sure is nice to see it out in the sunlight again. This side of the car is definitely in worse shape. It's got rust on the front, the doors. So the larch forest kind of took a bit of a back seat today. Here's the chickens are out today. Hello. How are you? Hello. Hi. Hi. Hello. Hi. What a beautiful bird you are. Yeah. So I haven't done any more work on it tonight. It's starting to cool down a bit. I still have some hours of daylight left to do some more work. So I'll try and get a bit more done tonight.